Are you really ready for this? She thought she was in control, thought she could play by her own rules, keeping him as a safe, constant presence in the background. But what happens when the game flips? When the man she took for granted starts making his own moves? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now let's get started. The instant my wife asked me to sit down, I knew something was off. It wasn't some deep-seated intuition or premonition, just a familiarity with the moment. I'd seen this exact scenario play out before, the forced cheerfulness in her smile, the restless way she shifted in her seat, the habitual motion of tucking her hair behind her ear. It was a pattern, a well-worn lead-up to something I wouldn't want to hear. I leaned back, setting my beer on the table, and waited. "So," she started, her voice unnaturally upbeat, almost as if she had rehearsed this. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us." There it was, the opening line of a carefully prepared justification. I remained silent, giving her nothing more than a slow, expectant nod. "I love you," she continued, reaching out to lightly brush her fingers over mine. "I really do, and I don't want to lose what we have." That was all I needed to hear to understand. She wasn't leaving me outright. No, this was something worse. Her fingers tapped anxiously against the table before she pressed on. "But I feel like I need to explore more," she admitted, her voice hesitant. "Meet new people, experience different connections." I didn't react, just took a measured sip of my beer and watched as she squirmed under the weight of my silence. "So what exactly are you saying?" I asked at last. Relief flickered across her face, pleased that I hadn't outright rejected the conversation. "I think we should open our relationship," she said carefully, searching my eyes for any sign of agreement. "Not because I don't love you, because I do, but I think this could help us grow, make us stronger in the long run." She had convinced herself that this was a modern, progressive approach to marriage, that I would nod understandingly, tell her I trusted her, and accept the arrangement of her being with other men while I remained the constant, reliable presence in the background. She had miscalculated. I tilted my head slightly. "So you want to date other men?" She hesitated, then bit her lip before nodding. "Yes. But it's not about replacing you," she added quickly. "It's about—" I raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "All right." Her eyes widened slightly. "All right?" I shrugged, taking another sip of my drink. "Yeah, if you want to see other men, that's fine, but it only makes sense that I do the same, you know, to keep things equal." The color drained from her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. "I mean," I said, slow and deliberate, "if you're going to be meeting new people, then I should too, just to make sure I'm not missing out on anything better." She barely flinched, but I saw it. It was brief, subtle, but there. This wasn't how she had expected me to respond. In her mind, I was supposed to be the ever-loyal, ever-patient husband who waited at home while she explored her options, secure in the belief that I would always be there when she was finished playing. I had just shattered that illusion. "You'd compare me?" she asked, and for the first time in a long while, I heard uncertainty in her voice. I nodded. "Well, yeah. How else would I know if I'm getting the best deal here?" Her jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. "That's not the point." "Isn't it?" I countered. "You're saying you need to explore so you can be sure you're not missing out. That means you're weighing your options. If you get to do that, so do I." She blinked, visibly thrown off. I don't want you seeing other women." I smiled. "Oh? Because that's not what this is about," she insisted, her voice carrying an edge of urgency now. She trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "I just want to broaden my experiences. But that doesn't mean I want to change our relationship." A low chuckle escaped me. So you want to sleep with other men while I stay exactly the same? She swallowed hard. It's not just about intimacy. Of course it is, I said flatly. You wouldn't be asking if you didn't already have someone in mind. That one landed. A flicker of panic crossed her face before she quickly masked it. That's not true. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Who is he? She froze. What? I tilted my head. You're not suggesting this because you might want to see other men. You're suggesting it because there's already someone. So who is he? She bit her lip, hard, a nervous habit of hers. That's not fair. Life's not fair, I said, standing up. You just thought you could rewrite the rules without having to follow them yourself. She stood abruptly, frustration flashing in her eyes. This isn't how I wanted this to go. I smirked. I figured. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. So what? You're just going to throw everything away because I wanted to have an open conversation? I let the silence stretch between us before responding. No, I'm not the one throwing anything away. You are. She sucked in a sharp breath. And in that moment, I saw it. The fear. The realization that she had just lost control of the situation. This was unraveling in ways she hadn't accounted for, far removed from the controlled scenario she had so carefully constructed in her mind. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, stretched so taut that the slightest push could tear it apart. Her face remained composed, unreadable even, but the way her fingers tightened around her water glass betrayed her. She wasn't just uncomfortable, she was unraveling. She had entered this conversation under the assumption that she held all the leverage, that she could dictate the terms of her so-called open relationship, steering it in whatever direction she pleased. What she hadn't expected was my reaction. A subtle pivot, a mere comparison to other women, had thrown her completely off balance. I watched the war play out in her eyes as she grasped at an explanation. I don't see why you're saying this, she said finally, her voice calm but weighted. This isn't about replacing anyone. It's about embracing new experiences. Leaning back, I idly swirled the last dregs of beer in my bottle, feigning detachment. Of course, I said smoothly. That makes sense. Maybe you have a point. Maybe I've been too closed-minded about it. Her brows knit together as I continued, my voice light but deliberate. Perhaps I should explore too, really see what's out there. Who knows? It might make me appreciate what I have even more. Her lips parted as if to interject, then pressed shut again. It's not the same, she murmured. Why not? I countered. She hesitated, then exhaled sharply. I just don't want to jeopardize what we have. That made me laugh, a real, unrestrained laugh that made her flinch. Jeopardy? I repeated. You're the one who introduced this idea, not me. She didn't answer. I let the silence stretch, allowing her to sit with the weight of her own proposal. If she wanted to open the door, fairness dictated that I should have the same opportunity. Why should she be the only one dipping her toes in untested waters? I watched as the reality of it settled over her, the color draining from her face. For the first time in a long while, uncertainty flickered in her expression. In the days that followed, something shifted. Her demeanor softened, her touches lingered longer, her kisses held an unfamiliar urgency. She began coming home earlier, something she hadn't bothered to do in months. Even her style subtly changed, the flashier outfits swapped for something more subdued. I made a point of pretending not to notice. The real fracture in her confidence came one evening as she found me sprawled across the couch, idly scrolling through my phone. "Who are you texting?" she asked, voice casual but edged with something else. I lifted an eyebrow. "Why do you care?" She hesitated. "I was just asking." "Just a friend," I replied with an amused smirk. "Why? Worried about comparisons?" She sucked in a quiet breath. I saw it then, that flicker of doubt. She had assumed I would resist, that I would plead, that I would try to convince her to reconsider. Instead, I played along, and that unsettled her more than anything. That night, she initiated intimacy without warning. It wasn't passion. It was a calculated move, a desperate attempt to reassert control. I refused. The look on her face was priceless. "But you always want to," she whispered, confusion darkening her gaze as she sat up in bed. I simply shrugged. "Not tonight." She barely slept after that. By then, I was sure of one thing. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. Women don't propose open relationships on a whim. They test the waters, gauge reactions, lay the groundwork. She had someone in mind, likely had for weeks, maybe months. So, I did the logical thing. I started digging. She thought she had covered her tracks, but not well enough. A few password resets, some location tracking, and a conveniently placed friend in IT later, and I had a name. Thomas, a co-worker, unattached, older than me. Someone I had met before, even shaken hands with at a company event. The thought of him, standing there making small talk with me while likely fantasizing about her, sent a pulse of anger through me. But I suppressed it. This wasn't about emotion. This was about control. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I let her believe I was still following her lead. And then, I turned the tables. A week later, over breakfast, I casually mentioned I had plans that evening. "Plans?" she echoed, stirring her coffee with a little too much force. "Yeah," I said offhandedly. "Just meeting up for drinks. A friend's introducing me to someone." Her spoon clattered against the inside of her mug. "You're going on a date?" I smiled, entertained by her reaction. "I wouldn't call it that. Just seeing what's out there." She swallowed, her mind racing. She had never truly expected me to take her suggestions seriously, at least not in a way that worked to my advantage. That evening, I walked out the door without a backward glance. I wasn't meeting anyone, but she didn't need to know that. When I returned, she was still awake, waiting for me. "How was your night?" she asked, feigning nonchalance. "Good," I replied simply. Her fingers gripped the couch cushion. The panic in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. "Did you meet someone?" A slow grin spread across my face. "Why does that matter to you?" She parted her lips as if to answer, but hesitated, closing them just as quickly. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, she was the one caught off guard. The uncertainty, once mine, now belonged to her. The dynamic had shifted entirely. In the days that followed, an unspoken tension settled between us, heavy and persistent. She started texting more often, asking where I was, what I was doing. She prepared my favorite dishes, wore the perfume she knew I liked, but I never gave her the reassurance she sought. I let her sit with her own discomfort. And just like that, the foundation of our marriage cracked. She had always assumed she dictated the narrative, but now she watched helplessly as it slipped from her grasp. And I had no intention of stopping it. Not yet. Something in her had changed. The confidence was gone, the self-assured demeanor shattered. In its place, desperation. She hid it behind forced smiles, behind feeble attempts to rekindle what had long since turned to dust. But I saw through it. Every touch, every lingering glance, every exaggerated display of affection, it all reeked of one thing: fear. Not fear of losing me necessarily, but fear of losing control. For weeks, she had been so certain I would stay where she had left me, silent, accepting, watching from the sidelines while she enjoyed her newfound freedom. But now, she thought I was the one stepping outside the lines, and it was tearing her apart. The first crack showed at dinner. She had gone to great lengths, homemade meal, candlelight, an expensive bottle of wine we had been saving for a special occasion. I played along, feigning ignorance of the shift in her demeanor. "So," she said, twirling her fork idly between her fingers, "who is she?" I lifted my gaze, pretending confusion. Who? She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Don't play dumb. The woman you've been seeing, she clarified. The one you've been texting. A slow smirk curled on my lips. Why does it matter? Her grip on the fork tightened. Because it's absurd that you're actually… She cut herself off, exhaling sharply. I just think we need to be cautious about all of this. All of this? I echoed. You know what I mean. She shifted in her seat, avoiding my gaze. We don't want to do something we'll regret. I leaned back, studying her as she struggled to maintain composure. Like opening the marriage? She flinched. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. Maybe we rushed into it. There it was, the first sign she wanted to take it all back. But I wasn't about to hand her an easy escape. Thomas panics. The next day, I got confirmation that her little affair was feeling the pressure. A blocked number called 3 times before I finally answered. Hello? Silence. Then, a voice I recognized. Look, we need to talk, Thomas said, his tone uneasy. I smirked. Do we? A sharp exhale on the other end. Listen, man, I don't want any trouble. I didn't know. Didn't know what? That you knew, he admitted. She told me it was complicated, that you two were figuring things out. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. I don't care what she told you, I finally said, voice steady. What matters is what's happening now. And what's happening now is that she's realizing she made a mistake. A long pause, then cautiously. Are you going to tell her you know? I chuckled softly. What do you think? More silence. Then, in a strained voice, he said, She's different lately. Distant. On edge. I think she's rethinking everything. Of course she was. I gave him nothing. That's not my problem, I said at last. Look, I just want to be clear. I don't want this coming back on me. And there it was, the real reason for his call. He wasn't worried about her. He was worried about himself. Coward. I exhaled slowly. I guess we'll see. Then I ended the call. She breaks. That night, she snapped. I was on the couch, casually scrolling through my phone, pretending to be deep in a conversation that didn't exist. She stormed into the room, frustration coloring her face. Who is she? She demanded. I didn't look up. She snatched the phone from my hands. You heard me, she snapped. Who is she? I leaned back, watching as she scrolled frantically through my messages. She wouldn't find anything. There was no one. There never had been. But that wasn't the point. The point was that she was unraveling. You don't like this feeling, do you? I murmured. She looked up, anger and confusion warring in her expression. What are you talking about? I stood, looming over her. Doubt gnawed at her, the slow, creeping awareness that she might not hold the irreplaceable position she once believed she did. She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. You were perfectly content when you thought I'd stay silent, letting you indulge without consequence, I continued, voice even. But now that the situation has shifted, you suddenly can't handle it. She sucked in a sharp breath, but no words came. I leaned in slightly, studying her reaction. Tell me, was an open relationship ever something you truly wanted? Or was it just a convenient cover to cheat without guilt? Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. I gave a knowing nod. That's what I thought. The final move was already in motion. For 48 hours, I let her sit in the quiet horror of her unraveling world before delivering the inevitable blow. When she returned from work, an envelope rested on the kitchen counter, waiting. Inside, undeniable proof, every message, every hotel reservation, every call log. And at the bottom, a pre-prepared separation agreement. She took it in trembling hands, her face draining of color as she moved toward the living room. You knew, she whispered, barely audible. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my drink before setting it down with care. Of course I knew. Her glassy eyes searched mine. How long? I shrugged. Long enough. Her breath hitched. So, what now? I let the silence stretch between us before answering. You have two options. Sign the agreement and leave with some dignity, or fight it and make this far worse for yourself. Her expression twisted in anguish. I don't want to lose you. A bitter chuckle escaped me. That's funny. You didn't seem too concerned about losing me when you were sneaking around with him. A choked sob escaped her, but I remained still, unaffected. She had assumed she could have both, her affair and my unwavering presence. What she never understood was that she had never been my priority. Her fingers tightened around the envelope, knuckles white. The evidence left no room for denial. The carefully constructed illusion she had lived behind had shattered, and now she had nowhere to turn. Her voice was barely a whisper. I can fix this. A sharp laugh almost broke free. Fix what, exactly? She swallowed, her desperation creeping into each word. Us. Us. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the us you were willing to throw away for Thomas? The us that meant so little while you planned your little affair? Her breath caught. I wasn't trying to replace you. No, I said, my voice void of warmth. You just expected me to sit in the background while you explored your options. A safety net. A backup plan in case your new adventure didn't work out. Silence hung between us. I could see her mind racing, searching for some way to salvage what she had destroyed. She had anticipated resistance, maybe even an argument, a fight to keep her. But I had no intention of giving her the satisfaction. This was her mess to sit in. One last, desperate attempt. One last gamble. Her voice softened, laced with the same sweetness I had once believed was genuine. I was reckless. I see that now. I don't want anyone else, just you. I shook my head. No. You don't get to say that now. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Why not? Because, I said coldly, you weren't saying it before you realized I could walk away. A strangled sob tore from her. I didn't let her continue. You made your choice. Now you live with it. Alone. She broke then, tears spilling freely as she collapsed into a chair. This wasn't how she imagined it ending. She had convinced herself she was always in control, that I would never leave, never refuse to fight for her. But she had been wrong. And now, she was facing the wreckage she created. She wasn't the only one unraveling. The next morning, Thomas's name flashed across my phone screen. The moment I answered, his voice cracked with nerves. Look, man, I swear, I never meant for this to happen. I leaned back. Did you think I'd just be okay with it? He hesitated. I thought she was serious about the open relationship. She told you I was on board? Amusement laced my words. Yeah. I didn't think she'd react like this. She showed up at my place last night crying. She said you were divorcing her, that it was my fault. A smirk tugged at my lips. And I can't have this getting out. His voice wavered. I have a reputation. I work with her. If this blows up, I cut him off. Maybe you should have thought about that before you got involved with another man's wife. He exhaled shakily. Listen, man, I don't want trouble. Maybe we can work something out? Maybe you don't have to go through with the separation? This story has come to an end. Every choice has consequences. Freedom without responsibility is an illusion. If you're willing to risk what matters most, be prepared to lose it. The biggest mistake is assuming someone will always wait, that you can play with emotions without facing the fallout. But life offers no guarantees. Every action comes at a price. This story is a reminder. Respect, trust, and loyalty take years to build, but only a moment to destroy. And the worst realization? Understanding it when it's already too late. Value those who stand by you before testing if you have a backup plan. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. Imagine this. 7 years of marriage. You plan a romantic dinner, buy her favorite wine, set the table, and instead of a love you, you get a cold message. I need a break from being your wife. But the worst part? While you wait, thinking maybe she's just stressed, she's checked into a luxury hotel, and she's not alone. Now most people would explode, but what if instead you stayed calm and plotted your next move? This is not just a story about betrayal. It's about taking back control, about outsmarting the one who thought they'd broken you. Stay till the end to see how a man who was left with nothing ended up winning everything, quietly but powerfully. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. 7 years into our marriage, I had imagined a simple, meaningful evening together. Nothing extravagant, just something personal to celebrate us. With both of us buried in work lately, I thought a quiet dinner at home would be the perfect way to reconnect. I went out of my way to pick up her favorite wine, carefully arranged the table, and even bought her a small gift. Not something expensive, but something that showed how much I cared. From the moment we woke up, she hadn't said a single word about our anniversary. No text, no casual happy anniversary, not even a passing comment to suggest she remembered. I kept telling myself she must be overwhelmed with work, too busy to acknowledge the day. Maybe she was planning her own surprise and waiting for the right moment. I tried to dismiss the uneasy feeling creeping up inside me, but as the evening hours slipped by, she still hadn't come home. No call, no message, nothing. Finally, unable to take the silence any longer, I sent her a text. Hey, what time do you think you'll be home? I've got something special planned. No reply. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. The dinner I had carefully prepared sat on the table, untouched and growing cold. The wine, unopened. Just as I was reaching for my phone to call her, it buzzed in my hand. A message. I need a break from being your wife. I stared at the words, stunned. There was no explanation, no emotion, just that cold, final sentence. At first, I thought it had to be a sick joke. Surely there was more to it. But nothing followed. No clarification, no smiley face to suggest she was kidding. I immediately tried calling her, straight to voicemail. I sat frozen at the table, looking at the 2 place settings I had prepared, struggling to understand what had just happened. Was this out of nowhere? Had I missed the signs? Had I done something without realizing it? I scrolled back through weeks of our conversations, searching desperately for a clue, some moment where things had gone wrong. But there was nothing that stood out. A heavy knot settled in my chest. My hands trembling slightly, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. I don't even know what I was looking for, but I found it anyway. A charge from earlier that day. A reservation at one of the most expensive hotels in town. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. The blunt message, her absence, and now this. Needing space wasn't about clearing her head. Still, I checked the hotel's website, a high-end, exclusive place. Definitely not somewhere you stay just to think. Part of me wanted to get in the car and drive straight there to confront her face to face. But then what? A dramatic scene in the middle of a hotel lobby? A fight that would leave me more broken than I already felt? Instead, I forced myself to pause and think. I realized I needed to be careful. If she had gone this far to plan everything in secret, I couldn't afford to react without a plan of my own. So I cleaned up the table, put away the untouched food, and sat back down with my laptop. If she wanted space, fine. I would give her exactly what she asked for, but on my terms. I knew if I rushed to confront her now, she'd have excuses ready, half-truths and lies to cover up what was really happening. I needed solid proof, something she couldn't deny or twist. First, I checked our shared phone account. It took only minutes to spot a number that showed up constantly. Late-night calls, early morning texts, messages during lunch. It wasn't saved in her contacts, but I recognized it immediately. The same coworker she always mentioned, and the same one who had just posted a check-in at that same hotel. My chest tightened. Next, I dug into our shared cloud storage, a place we rarely used, but where her phone sometimes auto-uploaded photos. As I scrolled through recent uploads, one picture hit me like a punch to the gut. A cocktail glass on a sleek marble table, her hand holding it. And in the glass's reflection, another drink, another hand, a man's hand. The hotel's logo faintly visible in the background. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks. Still, I kept searching. Her laptop was connected to our Wi-Fi, and I knew she sometimes forgot to log out of her private email. Sure enough, when I checked, I found what I feared most, a string of unsent emails sitting in her drafts folder. They said everything. Emails she never sent but clearly poured her heart into. Messages about how she wanted more, how things had just happened between her and this man. Complaints about our marriage, about how tired she was of pretending. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This had been going on for a while, longer than I had ever realized. And as I read through those words, my stomach turned. There were plans, trips they wanted to take together, dreams they shared, jokes about me, about how easy it was to keep me in the dark. Every word was a dagger. But I made myself keep reading, no matter how much it hurt. My first instinct was to lash out, to call, to yell, to demand answers. But I held it all in, because I knew rage wouldn't help me now. I needed to be calm, collected, and smart. This wasn't just about the night she didn't come home. This was about facing a truth I couldn't ignore anymore. Rather than confronting her immediately, I took a calculated approach. I gathered every shred of evidence, screenshots, email backups, copies of financial statements, meticulously storing them on an external hard drive. If everything unraveled, I wasn't going to risk losing proof. With my evidence secured, I turned my attention to our finances. I combed through every transaction, tracing exactly how much of our money had been funneled into her hidden affair. Hotel stays, extravagant meals, luxury spa days, every indulgence charged directly to our shared account. That was the final confirmation. It wasn't just deceit. She had been funding her betrayal with the money I worked for. That realization settled deep within me. I locked away the evidence and leaned back, absorbing the weight of it all. There was no repairing this. No way to pretend it hadn't happened. She had orchestrated her double life, confident I would remain oblivious. But she was wrong. She had no idea that I knew the truth, no clue that her illusion of control was nothing more than a false sense of security. I refused to react with rage. I wouldn't plead for explanations or make a spectacle of the situation. No, I was going to be strategic. The key to this was patience, waiting for the moment she least expected my move. Knowing the truth was only half the battle. The real challenge was using it wisely. If I wanted to walk away intact, financially stable, emotionally grounded, I needed to be smarter than her. My first step, securing legal counsel. Not just any lawyer, but someone experienced in handling high-stakes divorces, particularly those involving infidelity and significant assets. At our first meeting, I laid everything out. The messages, bank records, the damning proof of her affair. My attorney reviewed it all, his face impassive as he flipped through the documents. Finally, he looked up and assured me, "You have more than enough. This will work in your favor." That was all the confirmation I needed. We meticulously crafted a plan. I wasn't looking for prolonged conflict, but I wasn't going to let her walk away with half of everything after what she had done. We analyzed every asset, bank accounts, investments, real estate, and at my lawyer's advice, I immediately began disentangling my finances. The next step was shielding my income. I opened a new personal bank account and gradually redirected my paychecks there, careful not to raise suspicion. At the same time, I combed through our shared statements, documenting every expense tied to her affair. Hotel rooms, jewelry, designer gifts, all irrefutable evidence that she had been living off my earnings. That was going to work against her in court. With my financial stability safeguarded, I shifted my focus to our home. Although we both legally owned it, I had been the primary contributor to the mortgage. My lawyer's advice was clear: stay put. If she chose to leave, that was her decision, but I wasn't about to be forced out of my own house. I also took precautions to protect what truly mattered: important documents, sentimental items, valuables, gathering them discreetly and moving them to a trusted friend's place, ensuring they wouldn't be lost in the fallout. Throughout all of this, I maintained my routine. I went to work, engaged in casual conversations, and acted as if nothing had changed. When she sent messages, I responded without giving anything away. When she came home, I made small talk, offering nothing more. She truly believed she had gotten away with it. She thought I was blind, that I had accepted her vague explanations about needing space. What she didn't realize was that I was methodically sealing off every escape route, leaving her with no way out. A few days later, I met with my lawyer once more to finalize the divorce papers. Everything was falling into place. She assumed she still held all the power, but in reality, she had already lost. She just didn't know it yet. The evening she returned, she carried herself as if nothing had happened. No apologies, no explanations, just a casual air, as if she were coming back from an ordinary business trip. I was in the kitchen, slicing vegetables, when I heard the door open. I didn't even glance up. "Hey," she greeted, dropping her bag by the entrance. "Hey," I responded, my attention fixed on my task. A silence stretched between us. She had expected something, a confrontation, an outburst, a demand for answers. But she got nothing. She stepped further into the room, scanning my face, likely searching for some indication that things had changed. "How was your week?" she asked, her voice overly casual, as though testing the waters. "Busy," I replied simply, giving her nothing more. For a split second, unease flickered across her expression. This wasn't the reaction she had envisioned. There were no accusations, no desperate pleas for explanations. I wasn't playing the role of the wounded, suspicious husband. I was calm, distant, unshaken. She adjusted her approach, offering a vague recounting of a weekend spent with friends, slipping in excuses about needing clarity and feeling overwhelmed. I nodded. "Sounds nice," I said, still withholding any reaction. She hesitated, clearly waiting for me to press her for details. When I didn't, she picked up her bag and disappeared into the bedroom. Over the following days, she attempted to restore a sense of normalcy, going about her daily routine, scrolling through her phone, acting as though everything had settled back into place. I played my role to perfection, continuing to act the part of the oblivious husband. I never asked where she had been. I didn't pry for explanations. I let her believe she was still in control. Every so often, she would drop subtle hints to gauge my reaction, mentioning the coworker I knew she had been sleeping with, complaining about work stress, even suggesting we work on better communication. Each time, I remained neutral, giving her nothing to latch onto. Meanwhile, I was quietly preparing for the inevitable moment she never saw coming. I could see it in her eyes, the way her confidence had grown steadily over the past few weeks. She truly believed she had managed to smooth things over, that her so-called break was now just a footnote in our history. In her mind, I should simply be grateful that she had decided to come back at all. It wasn't surprising when she finally broached the topic I had been expecting. We sat at the dinner table, the clink of cutlery against our plates the only sound between us. Silence hung heavy in the air. Then, as if executing a carefully planned move, she set her fork down and turned toward me. "I've been thinking," she started, her tone calculated, as if she'd practiced the words beforehand. "Maybe we should talk about us." I took a slow sip of water, meeting her gaze without a flicker of emotion. "All right," Go ahead. She shifted slightly, clearly weighing her words before speaking. I just think it would be good to clarify where we stand. You know, set some expectations so that we don't misinterpret each other's intentions. She spoke as if she were guiding the discussion, still convinced she held the upper hand. I remained impassive, leaning back in my chair. That sounds reasonable, I said, my voice smooth, inviting her further into the trap I had been laying. She mistook my composure for agreement, continuing with cautious optimism. She talked about how relationships change, how people need room to reassess their needs, how it's only natural to adapt. Every word was deliberate, as if testing how much she could reframe her actions without outright admitting to them. I just think, she continued, that if we want this to work, we should be open to adjustments. Adjustments. That was the word she chose, not regret, not an apology, just a vague, self-serving suggestion designed to make her choices seem acceptable in hindsight. I leaned in slightly, holding her gaze. And what kind of adjustments are you suggesting? She hesitated, clearly thrown off by my calm demeanor. Well, I needed space, and I think that's fair. We should both feel like it's okay to take time for ourselves when we need to, you know. Without guilt. I nodded as if I were carefully considering her words. No guilt. Understood. Her posture relaxed ever so slightly, mistaking my response for agreement. And look, I know it was abrupt, but I really did need that time. Maybe going forward, we can be a bit more flexible with each other. About our expectations. She was dancing around her betrayal, dressing it up as something mature and reasonable. But she wasn't seeking resolution. She wasn't offering honesty. She was rewriting the past, twisting it to justify herself. I could see it in her expression. She believed I would go along with it because I had let her speak this long. Without a word, I pushed back from the table and walked over to the counter. I picked up the envelope I had been waiting to present and placed it in front of her. She frowned, eyes flicking to mine. What's this? You said you needed a break from being my wife? I said, my voice even, controlled. So I've decided to make that permanent. Her complexion paled as she stared at the envelope. A shaky laugh escaped her lips. Wait. What? Divorce papers. The color drained entirely from her face. She tore the envelope open, flipping through the pages, her hands trembling as she tried to grasp the reality of what she was holding. This isn't a joke, is it? No, I said flatly. She looked up at me, disbelief clouding her eyes. You had these prepared already? Yes. Realization struck her like a wave, and she exhaled shakily. You're serious? Completely. The confident woman who had started this conversation was gone. The script she had written for this moment was unraveling before her eyes. She blinked rapidly, scrambling for words, for anything that might let her regain control. We don't have to do this. We can talk. I was just... No, I interrupted, my tone as sharp as a blade. You weren't just saying. You were making excuses for what you've already done. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. You made your choices, I continued, my voice unwavering. You took your space. You used our money to fund your new life, and you thought I would just sit here, waiting for you to come back and decide how things move forward. She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the divorce papers like they might vanish if she held them tight enough. I never meant... I don't care what you meant. My voice was steel. It's over. And since I have all the evidence I need, I suggest you sign those papers before this turns into something even worse. For the first time, she understood. The power she had clung to was gone. She wasn't the one dictating what happened next. I was. She stared at the documents, fingers trembling. I could see her mind working, trying to twist the situation, to find an angle that would put her back in control. But there was nothing left to manipulate. Not anymore. I don't understand why you're doing this, she murmured, her voice barely audible. A bitter chuckle escaped me. You don't understand? I repeated. You lied. You cheated. You drained our finances to keep your affair afloat. She shook her head, quick and desperate. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I cut her off coldly. And the worst part? You didn't even have the decency to admit it. You wanted to keep me waiting, to hold me in reserve while you figured out if I was still worth it to you. Her breath came unevenly, panic creeping into her expression. But I was done waiting, done playing her game. And for the first time, she finally saw it. I was no longer hers to manipulate. You don't have to do this, she murmured, making one last plea. We can still fix things, if we just try. I exhaled, slow and deliberate. No, I said. There was nothing left to salvage, and even if there was, I had no desire to anymore. She hesitated, flipping through the stack of papers as if stalling could somehow change the inevitable. What if I refused to sign? Her voice was thin, almost brittle. Then I'll take everything I have and present it in court, I answered evenly. The messages, the financial records, all the proof showing you drained our joint account to finance your getaway with him. You can decide how this plays out, but the outcome won't change. Her grip tightened around the documents, her knuckles whitening. She remained motionless, staring blankly at the surface of the table, lost in thought. Then, without another word, she pushed back her chair and stormed off, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I didn't follow. 3 days later, the papers returned to me, her signature inked at the bottom. The divorce proceeded more smoothly than I'd anticipated, likely because I had built an indisputable case. My lawyer handled the formalities, and with nothing left for her to contest, she had no ground to resist. In the end, she walked away with far less than she had counted on, and soon, everything she had gambled for began to crumble. The affair she had risked it all for, it unraveled. The moment things got serious, the man disappeared, leaving her stranded. Whatever future she had envisioned with him disintegrated before it even had a chance to begin. Then, as it always does, the whispers started. Rumors about her affair circulated at work. Office gossip spreads quickly, especially when it involves extravagant hotel stays and dubious business trips at the company's expense. Her reputation took a hit, and those promotions she had once taken for granted, they never materialized. Even the friends she had been certain would stand by her side began to drift away. Meanwhile, I was finally unshackled. No more doubts, no more waiting for validation from someone who had stopped seeing my worth long ago. I turned inward, dedicating myself to rebuilding, to crafting a life unburdened by the weight of a marriage that had withered long before it ended. For the first time in what felt like ages, my life was my own. Months passed. One evening, while out with friends, I spotted her. She was alone at a small cafe, eyes fixed on her phone, waiting for a message that would never arrive. Our gazes met briefly. I gave a single nod, acknowledging, but nothing more, and then I turned away. She was no longer my concern. This story has come to an end. When a person decides to betray, they lose not only love, but also trust, something that can never be regained. Never let others play with your life. Learn to say stop in time, to pull yourself together, and to start living anew with pride and dignity. Sometimes strength is not about revenge, but about the ability to walk away while preserving yourself. And remember, if someone betrayed you, it's not your loss, it's theirs. Value yourself, and don't hold on to those who fail to see your worth. After all, happiness begins with self-respect. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you? Imagine your wife, after 7 years of marriage, calmly looks you in the eyes and says, "I'm spending the weekend with another man, just a few days, and when I'm back, everything will be like it was." What would you do? Forgive her? Accept it? But the man in this story chose a very different path. When the person you love destroys everything with a single sentence, who are you then? A victim, or someone who rises and takes control? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. My name is Michael, and up until a week ago I believed my marriage was solid. Not without its imperfections, of course. No relationship is flawless. But I thought we had something built on trust, respect, and years of shared history. Never did I imagine that a single conversation could shatter everything so completely. It happened on a Friday evening. After an exhausting day at work, all I wanted was to come home, unwind, and let go of the fatigue clinging to me. But the moment I stepped inside, I sensed something was wrong. My wife, Bridget, was sitting on the couch, one leg draped over the other, a glass of wine delicately cradled in her hand. Her expression was unfamiliar, not angry, not sorrowful, but something controlled, intentional. The air felt heavy, charged with an unease that made my pulse quicken before she even spoke. "Hey," I greeted her cautiously, loosening my tie. "Everything all right?" She gestured toward the cushion beside her, silently inviting me to sit. I hesitated, a sinking feeling settling in my gut, but I did as she asked. She inhaled deeply, as if preparing for what she was about to say, and then the words left her lips. "I want to spend the weekend with another man." At first, I laughed, an instinctive, nervous reaction, because surely this was some kind of joke. But she didn't laugh. She didn't even smirk. She simply watched me with those detached, unreadable eyes. "What?" My voice wavered slightly, my mind struggling to make sense of what I had just heard. "I've been thinking about this for some time," she explained, swirling the wine in her glass as if discussing an ordinary weekend plan. "I need something different, something exhilarating." My stomach twisted. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of cruel test. "Are you serious?" The words barely made it past my tightening throat. She exhaled, exasperation flickering in her gaze, as though I was the one being unreasonable. "Michael, I love you, but I don't want to reach the end of my life filled with regrets. I need to explore, to know what else is out there. It's just one weekend. No obligations, no consequences. And after that, everything can go back to the way it was." I stared at her, this woman I had devoted 7 years to, casually presenting this as if it were a minor request. And the worst part? She didn't seem ashamed. There was no guilt, no hesitation. If anything, she appeared relieved, as if she had unburdened herself of something long overdue. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, to remind her of the vows we had made and the life we had built together. But the words refused to come. Instead, I sat there, numb, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. "I know this is a lot to take in," she murmured, reaching for my hand. I recoiled. For the briefest moment, irritation flickered across her face before she masked it with another weary sigh. "Michael, this doesn't have to change anything between us." A hollow laugh escaped me. "You actually believe that?" She didn't answer. Instead, she emptied the last of her wine, set the glass aside, and rose to her feet. "I've already made arrangements," she said, her tone disturbingly casual. "I leave tomorrow morning." And that was it. No apology, no second thoughts, just a simple, matter-of-fact statement. I watched her retreat upstairs, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence of our living room. I had never felt so insignificant, so invisible. But as the hours crawled by, my initial shock gave way to something sharper, something colder. a realization settled over me. I was done being the reliable husband she took for granted. She wanted a weekend of adventure? Fine. By the time she returned, she wouldn't recognize the life she had so carelessly abandoned. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, her words echoed in my mind, poisoning me with their indifference. I need to experience something different. She had said it so effortlessly, as if our years together were disposable, as if I were nothing more than a worn-out relic she was eager to set aside. The betrayal wasn't just in her decision, it was in the expectation that I would simply accept it, that I would remain the patient, faithful man waiting in the wings. By sunrise, something within me had shifted. I wasn't just devastated. I was livid. That morning, Bridget packed her bags with the nonchalance of someone preparing for a weekend retreat. Not a trace of doubt crossed her features. She even pressed a light kiss to my cheek before walking out the door. "You'll see," she said breezily. "This will be good for us." I didn't reply. I couldn't. I merely stood there, watching as she rolled her suitcase down the driveway, climbed into an Uber, and disappeared from sight. For a moment, the silence in the house pressed against my chest. My wife had just left me behind to pursue a fleeting thrill, and I was expected to wait for her return? No, absolutely not. That was the moment I made my choice. Bridget had taken her path, and now I was taking mine. I refused to be the heartbroken man left drowning in grief. I refused to be the husband she expected to return to, as if nothing had changed. By the time she came back, everything would be unrecognizable. I stepped into our bedroom, the space we had shared for years, and took it in. I imagined her returning after her reckless escapade, assuming she could slip back into the life she had so easily discarded. She had no idea what awaited her. I reached for my phone and made a series of calls, first to a moving company, then to a locksmith. By noon, they arrived. Standing in the doorway, I gave a simple directive. Take everything from the master bedroom. Leave the bed. Get rid of it. I don't care where it goes. Just make sure it's gone. They wasted no time. Every last item, every remnant of her presence was hauled away, leaving no trace behind. When the job was done, the room stood empty, stripped of identity, just as I was when she tore everything apart with a few casual words. Then came the locksmith. I had him replace every lock, the front door, the back door, even the garage. He didn't ask questions, just gave a curt nod and got to work. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood in what might as well have been an entirely different house. The place that once reflected our shared life was now a blank canvas, and I wasn't stopping there. Pouring a drink, I settled onto the lone remaining piece of furniture and pulled out my phone. I had never entertained the idea of dating apps before, always believing in deep connections, in love that grew over time. But that version of me was gone. I wasn't searching for love. I was searching for something different. Minutes later, I found her. Cassandra. A name as striking as the woman herself. Raven black hair, piercing green eyes, and a smirk that radiated effortless confidence. A few messages passed between us, and before an hour was up, she was already on her way. The knock came, cutting through the newfound silence of my home. I took a last look around. Bridget had left thinking she held all the power, certain I'd be here, drowning in regret, desperate for her return. She had no idea. By the time she came back, she'd be the one staring at the ruins of her past life. Smirking, I pulled open the door. "Hi, Cassandra," I said, my voice steady, tinged with something new and unshakable. She stepped in without hesitation, claiming the space like she had always belonged. No awkward greetings, no meaningless small talk. Her sharp gaze swept over the room, assessing, as if it were already hers. "Nice place," she murmured, shrugging off her jacket and carelessly tossing it over the arm of the couch. I poured 2 drinks, my hands steady, my mind eerily clear. Just yesterday, My wife had sat on that very couch and told me she needed to feel another man's touch. Now, another woman sat there instead, her name already fading into insignificance. Cassandra watched me, tilting her head, amusement flickering in her expression. "Tell me something," she mused. "A man like you, why is he suddenly single?" A short, dry laugh escaped me. "Who said I'm single?" Her eyebrow arched slightly. "Oh?" I leaned back, taking a slow sip. "My wife took the weekend to broaden her horizons," I said smoothly. "So I figured I'd do the same." For a moment, I braced for judgment, for some tired cliché about revenge or bitterness. But Cassandra only chuckled, leaning in slightly. "I like that," she murmured, her voice playful, yet edged with something sharper. "A man who knows how to take control." Control. That was the key. For the first time since Bridget shattered our marriage, I wasn't just reacting. I wasn't drowning in her choices. I was making my own, and I had no plans to stop. By Sunday evening, the house no longer felt like a graveyard of betrayal. It was something else entirely. Mine. Every last piece of Bridget's belongings had been removed, the bedroom walls repainted, the sheets changed, the furniture rearranged. No more abandoned hair ties, no lingering trace of her perfume. She had been erased. Cassandra stayed the whole weekend, not because I needed her to, not because I feared being alone, but because I wanted her there, because for once, I deserved someone who actually wanted me, not just the comfort I provided. Then, at precisely 6:07 p.m., my phone buzzed. Bridget. I let it ring, again and again. Finally, I picked up, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough to unsettle her. "Already?" My voice was calm, detached, a beat of hesitation. I just got home." Then, more urgently, "The front door, my key isn't working." A slow smile played on my lips as I swirled the whiskey in my glass. "That's odd," I mused. "Maybe because it's not your home anymore." Silence. "Michael," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "What? What do you mean?" I exhaled, savoring the moment. "I mean, you made your choice. Now, I've made mine. You wanted something new? So did I." A disbelieving laugh crackled through the line, harsh, humorless. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "I told you this was just a weekend. It didn't mean anything." I glanced at Cassandra, who watched me with knowing amusement. "And yet," I said slowly, "you expected me to sit here waiting for you, like some obedient little husband?" Silence. Then, the futile scrape of a key jamming into a lock that would never turn. "Open the damn door, Michael." I took my time draining my glass before rising, making my way toward the entrance. When I finally pulled the door open, she stood there, suitcase in hand, her face pale, emotions warring between disbelief and fury. Her eyes flicked past me, locking onto Cassandra, who leaned casually against the staircase, draped in a silk robe, the one Bridget had once assumed would always be hers. Her breath caught. Who the hell is she?" I smirked. Something was off. Her lips parted, but the words never surfaced. Her gaze swept across the room, and a slow, creeping understanding settled over her. It was different. This was not the home she had left behind. The wedding photos that had once lined the walls were nowhere to be seen. The furniture, the decorations, even the scent lingering in the air, all of it foreign, unfamiliar. This place was no longer hers, and it never would be again. Bridget remained frozen in the entryway, her fingers tightening around the handle of her suitcase. Each breath she took was shallow, uneven, as though she were holding herself together by the thinnest thread. I watched as the realization played across her face, the slow, dawning awareness that everything had changed. Her perfume still lingered in the air, once a scent that had wrapped around me like comfort. Now, it felt intrusive, a relic of something that no longer belonged. Her eyes darted between me and Cassandra, who stood poised on the staircase before settling on the vacant spaces where she had once existed in this home. This isn't funny, Michael, she finally managed, her voice unsteady. Leaning lazily against the doorframe, I crossed my arms. Not a joke. Her face paled. Gone? What do you mean, gone? I moved everything, I said with a shrug. New bedroom, new locks, new life. My lips curled into a smirk. You wanted a break, didn't you? Well, I figured I'd make the most of mine. For the first time since she had walked out that door, something within her cracked. She exhaled shakily, her voice barely above a whisper. You're not serious. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? And how exactly was it supposed to happen, Bridget? Were you expecting to return and find me exactly where you left me? Waiting, heartbroken? She swallowed hard. It wasn't meant to be like this, Michael. I let out a dry, humorless chuckle. You needed to try something different. Isn't that what you told me? I said, finishing her thought for her. Well, so did I. Her hands clenched into fists. You don't just replace a marriage, Michael. That made me laugh, an actual, sharp, bitter laugh. Don't you? Because that's exactly what you did, isn't it? I gestured toward her, at the suitcase still gripped in her hand. You left without hesitation, off to chase something new, leaving me behind like an afterthought. And now, you're shocked that I didn't just sit here waiting? Her mouth opened, then shut. No justification, no excuse. She had believed she controlled the situation, that she could step into another life, experiment, and return to find me unchanged, hurt, but faithful, waiting. She had miscalculated. I watched the fear settle in her eyes. Not anger, not yet. Fear. The sinking realization that she had shattered something beyond repair. I thought we were strong enough to survive this, she murmured. I scoffed. Strong enough to survive your selfishness? That's rich. Her eyes shimmered, but the sight stirred nothing in me. I had spent years being the devoted husband, the one who put her first, the one who stayed steady. That man was gone. She took a tentative step forward, her voice trembling. Michael, please. Tell me this is just some cruel joke. I exhaled slowly, my gaze drifting past her to the car still idling at the curb. I'm not joking, Bridget. My voice was quiet, steady. You made your choice, and now I've made mine. The words struck her like a physical blow. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be left behind. Her grip on the suitcase trembled as she turned sharply toward Cassandra, her voice laced with disbelief. And you? What is this? Some kind of twisted game? Cassandra's expression remained composed, her shoulders lifting in a slow shrug. Not a game, an opportunity. Bridget let out a brittle, disbelieving laugh. You think you can just step in and take my place? A smirk played at the corners of Cassandra's lips, her green eyes gleaming. Seems like I already have. Bridget looked between the two of us, then back at the house, the place that was no longer hers. Her breath hitched, fingers tightening around the handle of her suitcase. Finally, she whispered, I never thought you'd actually go through with this. I met her gaze, unwavering. That makes two of us. Then, I closed the door. The sound of it locking into place echoed through the house, final and absolute. I inhaled deeply, my hand still resting on the doorknob, my pulse thrumming beneath my skin. I had played out this moment in my mind 100 times, screaming, accusations, maybe even shattered glass. But in the end, it was simple. A door shut. A chapter ended. Cassandra's voice broke the silence. That was satisfying to watch. I turned to find her leaning against the banister, arms crossed, amusement glinting in her eyes. The dim lighting cast deep shadows over her features, making her expression all the more unreadable. Was it? I muttered. brushing past her toward the living room. I poured myself a drink, pausing before taking a slow sip. Cassandra sauntered over, sinking into the couch with the easy confidence of someone who belonged there. She really thought she had you wrapped around her little finger, she mused. Thought she could step out, explore, and waltz back in like nothing had changed. I exhaled, staring into my glass. She did. My voice was quiet, reflective. That's the worst part. She actually believed I'd wait, that I'd sit here, miserable and faithful, while she chased something new. But she had been wrong. That wasn't love, just possession in disguise. The messages started flooding in the second I shut the door. A single vibration, then another, then an unrelenting series, demanding attention. With a tired sigh, I glanced at my phone and unlocked the screen. Michael, open up. We need to talk. Just let me in. This isn't how it was supposed to go. You're making a scene over nothing. I scoffed. Blowing things out of proportion? I tilted my phone toward Cassandra, who skimmed the texts before smirking. Classic, she muttered, shaking her head. She was beginning to understand she wasn't as indispensable as she once believed. I ignored the messages, but the buzzing refused to let up. Michael, are you seriously doing this? I gave you space. Now you're just being childish. Answer me. Now. And there it was. The shift. That inevitable moment when anxiety took root, when the loss of control became undeniable. I set my phone down on the table, exhaling as I leaned back into my chair. She's never been ignored before, Cassandra observed, watching me closely. She'll have to adjust. But even as I spoke, I recognized the truth. This wasn't over. Bridget was never the type to walk away without a fight. Hours slipped by, and for a fleeting moment I allowed myself to think she had finally accepted reality. Then came the knocking. Not timid or hesitant. No, this was relentless, desperate. Cassandra and I locked eyes. She really doesn't know when to quit, she murmured. I approached the door but didn't open it, instead peering through the peephole. Bridget stood rigid on the porch, arms crossed, eyes swollen, not just from crying, but from something far deeper, something insistent. She wasn't here to talk. She was here to win. Michael, she called, her voice eerily steady. You can ignore my messages, but we both know this isn't over. I stayed silent. A sharp breath. This isn't like you. You're not the kind of man who just throws everything away. Funny, I once believed the same about her. A pause, then a shift in posture. Fine, have your little tantrum. When you finally come to your senses, you'll realize how ridiculous you're being. My jaw clenched. Tantrum. The word landed like ice in my chest. That was it. The final confirmation. She didn't regret what she had done, only that she no longer had control over me. Beside me, Cassandra whispered, "She's still playing games." She was right. Bridget's voice softened, dripping with artificial sweetness. I'll be back tomorrow. You'll be thinking clearly by then. For the first time, I responded, "Don't bother." A long silence. Then, a quiet yet unwavering reply. "We'll see." I watched through the peephole as she finally turned and disappeared into the night, but I wasn't naive enough to believe she was truly gone. This was far from over. The next morning, I woke to the doorbell ringing in rapid, jarring succession, an insistent alarm of unwelcome persistence. I didn't need to check to know who it was. When I finally pulled the door open, there she stood, Bridget, gaunt and exhausted, desperation clinging to her like a second skin. Her voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry." But her words meant nothing. "It's over," I said, stepping back and closing the door. And for the first time, I felt it. Freedom. As the latch clicked into place, I knew without a doubt. I was done. This story has come to an end. No one should tolerate betrayal for the sake of keeping a relationship alive. When someone chooses to cross that line and put their own selfish desires above you, you have every right to choose yourself. Real love is built on mutual respect, not on excuses for hurtful actions. Value yourself enough to walk away from anyone who takes you for granted. And remember, if someone is willing to risk losing you, they never truly valued you in the first place. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.